So, I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine you are working this incredibly grueling 12-hour shift,
Oh, wow. Just exhausted already.
right? I mean, you are navigating a high-pressure environment, you're managing a team all day, and then you have to fight through this terrible traffic just to finally get home.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I'm assuming you're pulling your weight financially in this scenario.
Oh, absolutely. You pay exactly half of your household's bills, down to the penny. But then you walk through the door, you immediately have to start cooking dinner, and suddenly you are being scolded by your partner.
Let me guess. A partner who has been doing what all day?
Literally spending the entire day on the couch playing mobile games.
Oh, man.
And he's scolding you because you aren't showing him enough respect as the traditional head of the household.
It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? Like a complete collision of two entirely different centuries just playing out right there in one living room.
It really does. But, whether you are actively navigating the modern dating scene yourself, or maybe you're watching your friends struggle to find a partner, or you're just insanely curious about these shifting cultural dynamics,
Yeah.
you have likely noticed this massive unspoken frustration in the air.
Oh, it's definitely palpable.
Yeah. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a profound cultural shift that is currently playing out in the dating landscape of the Philippines.
Yeah.
We are looking at a huge stack of cultural critiques, essays, and observations that all ask one simple, but I mean incredibly heavy question.
Which is
What happened to Filipino men?
right. And to truly understand the gravity of that question, we first have to establish the baseline of what the historical expectation has actually always been.
The ideal, basically.
Exactly. For generations, there was this very specific, beautiful, traditional ideal known as the mabuting lalaki.
Which translates to the good man.
Yes, the good man. We're talking about the hardworking, family-oriented provider and protector. You know, the man who shoulders the heavy burden of the outside world just to ensure his wife and children are cherished and secure.
And that was essentially the agreed-upon social contract for a very long time.
It was.
But the materials we are exploring today, they highlight this stark, jarring contrast between that beautiful generational ideal and the modern reality.
And it's a reality that is causing some major shifts.
Huge shifts.
Yeah.
It's causing fiercely independent, highly capable women to just completely opt out of the local dating pool altogether. I mean, they're either choosing to stay happily single or they are actively looking abroad for partners.
Which is a massive demographic change. And actually, before we get into the exact mechanisms of why this is happening, it is vital that we do a quick neutrality check here.
Oh, yes. Good call.
Yeah, we need to make it explicitly clear to you, the listener, that we are impartially analyzing a specific cultural critique today. We're exploring these sociological viewpoints without endorsing them or, taking any sort of political side.
Right. We're just the messengers here.
Exactly. We are simply mapping out the ideas and observations contained in our source materials to understand a fascinating and clearly very complex societal shift.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because reading through this analysis, it feels like we are looking at an ecosystem that has completely fractured.
Fractured is a good word for it.
Yeah, it's like the current dating pool is a rigged game, where the rules haven't just changed, they've been rewritten to heavily favor one side.
That fracture is exactly where we need to start, because when a traditional ideal like the mabuting lalaki collapses, it doesn't just evaporate into thin air.
What does it do?
It splinters. It splinters into predictable behavioral patterns. And our materials identify several distinct profiles or archetypes that have emerged from this collapse.
And they aren't exactly flattering.
No, they aren't. We start by looking at men who have completely abdicated adult independence.
Okay, let's look at the first major pattern identified by the source. The eternal mama's boy.
Oh.
Well, to be clear, we aren't talking about a guy who just, loves and respects his mom. That's normal.
All right, that's healthy.
What we are talking about is a man who is financially and emotionally married to his childhood home, to the point where there is just zero room for anyone else.
It is a profound enmeshment. I mean, the source notes that his salary often goes straight to his mother for her to manage.
Wait, really? His whole paycheck?
In many cases, yes. And if he does get married, the expectation isn't that he and his new wife will build a separate autonomous life together.
Like most couples would do.
Exactly. The expectation is that the new wife will simply fold into his existing dynamic. She's expected to quietly accept his mother as the ultimate matriarch and decision-maker of their relationship.
That sounds incredibly stifling. But I want to dig into the psychology here for a second because it's just fascinating to me.
Go for it.
A lot of this analysis suggests that this mama's boy dynamic frequently stems from sons of single mothers who are like subconsciously trying to patch the void of an absent father.
Yes, that's a strong theme in the critique.
So my question is, if a man has spent his entire life operating as a surrogate emotional anchor for his mother, doesn't that massive emotional burden completely cripple his ability to be a present partner to his actual wife?
What's fascinating here is how the emotional economy of that household operates.
Emotional economy, what do you mean?
Well, you only have so much emotional currency to spend, right? If a man has spent his entire life playing a surrogate role in his childhood home, managing his mother's emotional state, acting as her primary companion, his emotional bank account is basically entirely depleted.
He's running on empty.
Exactly. Holding on to that childhood dependency destroys his capacity for adult partnership because he literally has nothing left in reserve to build a new foundation with someone else.
Wow. So he is essentially an empty vessel by the time he reaches the altar.
He's structurally unavailable. And that inability to take on adult weight leads directly into another behavioral pattern the critique explores,
Yes.
one that involves a really compelling cognitive dissonance. It's the dynamic of a man who desperately demands the ultimate respect, the title, and the status of being a traditional husband, but wants absolutely zero of the responsibility.
Oh, the feminine baby archetype.
That's the one. It is a fascinating psychological disconnect. You have a partner who wants the crown but refuses to carry the weight of the kingdom.
I mean, the source paints this wild picture of a wife working these grueling 12-hour shifts to keep the family afloat while the husband flat out refuses to work.
And not just that, he might even demand hired help, like a nanny, because taking care of his own children is deemed too hard.
That is such a wild cognitive dissonance to me. How does a partner rationalize demanding the authority of a traditional household head while completely rejecting the responsibilities that actually define that role?
It really comes down to separating the title from the labor.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Yeah. Well, when a culture places innate authority on a specific gender role, individuals can begin to feel entitled to the respect of that role simply by existing.
Rather than by earning it through actual action.
Exactly. When you normalize a man avoiding the physical labor of child-rearing or domestic upkeep, it's only a very small psychological step to avoiding adult labor entirely.
Which naturally brings us to the ultimate manifestation of that avoidance, right? The 40-year-old gamer.
Yes, the perpetual adolescent.
The materials describe this growing demographic of men in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s who are essentially jobless wanderers.
Just kind of floating through life.
Exactly. They live completely rent-free at their parents' house. They spend their days playing mobile games, consuming endless digital content, or, and this is a big one, chasing devastating losses on online gambling platforms.
And they possess zero drive to alter that situation. I mean, they eat free food, they pay no rent, and they are completely insulated from the harsh realities of the adult world.
But, you know, the truly staggering part of this observation for me is that despite having no financial stability, no independence, this demographic still genuinely expects to find a highly capable wife, have kids, and drag that new family right back into their parents' crowded living room.
It is a total detachment from reality.
Completely delusional.
And if we look closely at these patterns of dependency, like the extreme enmeshment with the mother, the demand for authority without labor, the perpetual adolescent, the underlying thread is a systemic refusal to step into adult accountability.
They just refuse to grow up.
Right. They are perpetually stuck in a state of being cared for, and they expect the women in their lives to seamlessly transition into maternal caretakers.
Right. I want to push back on this for a second.
Sure.
Because it is really easy to look at a guy who refuses to work or lives with his parents and spot the red flags. Those are the obvious extremes, you know.
Of course.
But what about the guys who actually have careers? The ones who look great on paper? Because in a modern economy, isn't splitting the bills exactly what equality is supposed to look like?
This raises an important question, and it is arguably the most insidious dynamic explored in the entire critique. It is the illusion of partnership.
The 50-50 professional.
Yes. On paper, this modern professional looks like the absolute ideal match. I mean, he champions the idea of a strong, independent career woman, and he insists on a rigid 50-50 split of all financial obligations.
Which, I mean, sounds completely fair on the surface. If you both work, you both pay.
Exactly. But the source labels this insidious because of what happens behind closed doors.
Right.
While the financial split is a strict 50-50, the domestic and emotional labor remains 100% on the woman's shoulders.
The classic trap.
Yep. The husband comes home from work, clocks out, and just mentally checks out. So the cooking, the cleaning, the schedule management, the emotional regulation of the children, that entire invisible mental load falls entirely on her.
Which the source calls a terrible deal masquerading as equality.
It really is.
It's like, okay, imagine having a terrible roommate. You live with someone who pays exactly half the rent, right down to the penny. But they leave all their dirty dishes in the sink. They never buy groceries. They never clean the bathroom. And yet they expect a trophy just for transferring their half of the rent every month.
That is a perfect analogy for weaponized equality.
They genuinely believe their financial contribution completely absolves them of the reality of living in a shared space.
Because he's using progressive financial ideals to mask traditional domestic neglect.
Yes.
He gets all the financial relief of a modern dual-income household, but he retains the domestic privilege of a 1950s husband.
Which is just a fundamental misrepresentation of what partnership actually means. It leaves the woman completely exhausted, essentially operating as a single mother who happens to have a roommate.
And that illusion of contribution takes on another form when we look at physical absence. The materials heavily discuss the dynamic of the bare minimum provider or the ghost.
Right. The guy who works overseas or is constantly out of town.
Yes, the dynamic where the financial remittance is present, but the partner is effectively a ghost.
Now, obviously the critique acknowledges the complex economic realities that force families apart for work, right?
It does, yes. But it focuses on the relational fallout. The husband sends just enough money to keep the family afloat, but is physically, mentally, and emotionally absent from the daily grind of raising a family.
But here's the catch. The wife doesn't get the actual autonomy of a single mother, does she?
No, she doesn't. She carries the entire practical burden of the household day in and day out, yet she still has to answer to and, submit to the authority of a husband who isn't there to lift any of the actual weight.
So she navigates all the crises, the illnesses, the daily discipline.
But her decisions can be overridden by a voice on a phone thousands of miles away.
That sounds maddening. It's all of the stress of marriage with none of the daily tangible support.
Exactly. And this evasion of weight leads to one more behavioral pattern highlighted in the critique, which is the absolute avoidance of commitment altogether.
The runner.
Yes. Born straight out of hyper-casual hookup culture and having zero accountability.
Right. This is the partner who absolutely loves the chase. He loves the validation of courtship.
But the absolute second reality sets in.
Like a positive pregnancy test.
Exactly. The moment a pregnancy test comes back positive or any serious commitment is required, he simply evaporates.
Just disappears like a ghost.
He leaves behind another woman to pick up all the pieces completely alone. So when we synthesize these dynamics, the weaponized 50-50 split, the absent provider, the disappearing partner, the common denominator becomes incredibly clear.
They just don't want the burden.
Right. Whether they are physically absent or just emotionally checked out on the couch while demanding a 50-50 financial split, the common thread is a total evasion of the true weight of partnership.
They want the benefits of a partner or the status of a patriarch without doing the actual unglamorous work required to sustain it.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have spent a lot of time looking at the symptoms. We know what these behaviors look like, but here's where it gets really interesting. Why is the dating pool experiencing this specific fracture?
Because it doesn't just happen on its own.
Exactly. These behavioral patterns don't just magically appear in a vacuum.
They are cultivated. And this is where the cultural critique shifts from merely observing the problem to explaining the mechanism behind it. The core thesis points to a deeply ingrained cultural enabling system.
Which is heavily rooted in a double standard of upbringing.
Very heavily.
The disparity in how children are raised is just staggering when you really look at it. The analysis points out that in so many households, daughters are raised from birth to be hyper-resilient.
They are taught to be fiercely independent and capable of enduring incredible amounts of stress.
Right. The expectations placed on them are immense. They're taught how to cook, how to clean, to study incredibly hard, and to flawlessly manage a household's emotional and practical needs.
They are essentially trained to be domestic and professional supercomputers.
Supercomputers, I love that. But the boys, on the other hand, they experience a completely different reality.
They are handed a cultural free pass.
Yes. When a boy falls short, When he avoids his chores, when he lacks emotional regulation or fails to take responsibility, the culture so often excuses it with a simple wave of the hand and a very specific phrase,
Lalaki kasi.
which translates to, he's just a man.
He's just a man. It is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card.
It really is.
But it operates a lot like economic inflation, you know? If a culture just keeps printing free passes for bad behavior, the value of that behavior eventually drops to zero in the relationship market.
Oh, that makes total sense.
By constantly lowering the bar to the floor to protect boys from accountability, society actively prevents them from developing the resilience required for actual adulthood.
So you have this ingrained childhood coddling. But it doesn't stop there. The critique layers in modern external factors that basically take this baseline of enablement and put it on steroids.
Precisely. You take a young man who has never been asked to carry emotional weight and you introduce him to the modern internet.
Which is full of toxic online subcultures.
Right. Toxic echo chambers that validate his entitlement. And then digital escapes, like the endless online gambling we discussed earlier, they provide this dopamine loop that replaces the need for real-world achievement.
And all of this happens in an environment with this severe, critical lack of accountable, mature male role models to intervene.
It's a perfect storm.
It really is a brutal irony. So we are actively, culturally pairing hyper-capable, resilient women with underdeveloped, coddled men who have been shielded from failure their entire lives.
It's exactly what's happening.
We're dealing with an entire generation of men who boldly demand the respect of a traditional patriarch, but possess the work ethic and emotional maturity of a dependent child.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can clearly see how this toxic mix of childhood coddling and modern digital echo chambers creates an entirely unsustainable societal reality.
The math just doesn't work.
It simply does not work. You cannot have one half of the population running on hyper-resilience and endless capability, while the other half rests on lalakikasi and expect stable, healthy partnerships to form.
Right? The structural integrity of that relationship is doomed from the start.
It's bound to collapse.
The center cannot hold. And according to the sweeping observations in these critiques, it isn't holding anymore. Women are waking up to the math, and they are refusing to participate in a losing equation.
Which brings us to the climax of this whole deep dive.
Yes, the behavioral shift, the opting out. So what does this all mean?
It means we've reached a turning point.
Exactly. The materials reach this incredibly empowering conclusion. They declare that the archaic narrative, the deeply ingrained idea that a woman just has to suffer in silence, endure neglect, and sacrifice her own peace just to keep a family together, no matter how completely useless the man is, that narrative is officially dead.
And that leads directly to the core takeaway from this cultural observation, speaking directly to you, the listener, as you navigate this landscape.
Listen closely to this part.
If you realize the dating pool is broken, you don't have to keep swimming in it. It is not your job to rehabilitate a partner who has been coddled and enabled by his family and society for 30 years. That is not your burden to bear.
I love that. When you finally realize your intrinsic worth, you raise your standards so high that these dysfunctional dynamics, the weaponized 50-50 professionals, the emotionally enmeshed men, the ghosts who want authority without labor, they simply cannot reach you anymore.
The conclusion drawn across these materials is surprisingly optimistic in its finality.
How so?
Basically, being single, successful, and at peace is infinitely better than being partnered and miserable.
Amen to that.
Focus on your own boundaries, maintain your peace, and let those men who refuse to grow up figure themselves out. Because this deeply entrenched enabling culture will never actually shift until women collectively stop accepting the bare minimum.
It requires a hard collective stop. It goes all the way back to my analogy of the rigged game.
Right, the casino analogy.
Yeah, if you realize the rule book demands all of your effort, your money, and your emotional labor, but offers none of the actual partnership or reward in return, you don't have to keep playing. You can just stand up, protect your peace, and walk away from the table.
The game only continues as long as you agree to play. But this raises a final, highly provocative thought that I want to leave you with today, building on everything we've just unpacked.
Oh, lay it on us.
If we are truly reaching a global tipping point, where an entire generation of hyper-capable women permanently opts out of the traditional dating pool to protect their peace, how will society fundamentally restructure itself?
Oh, wow.
When the traditional nuclear family is no longer the default building block of a community, how will we restructure our economy, our housing markets, and our long-term community support systems?
That is the billion-dollar question.
Yeah.
Because if women are refusing to build the foundation of a society on top of a swamp, the entire architecture of how we live and support each other is going to have to change.
Exactly.
Food for thought as you go about your week.